The hallway stretched endlessly ahead, lined with those familiar blue metal lockers that held 1,000 teenage secrets. Travis Kelce walked slowly through his old high school in Ohio, each step echoing off the polished floors that had witnessed countless victories, defeats, and dreams taking shape. The building felt smaller, the way childhood places always do when you return as an adult. But the smell was exactly the same, that mixture of industrial cleaner, old textbooks, and the faint aroma of cafeteria food that seemed permanently embedded in the wall. Travis had come back for a quick visit. Nothing formal, just a nostalgic walk through the place that had shaped so much of who he became. His childhood friend, Dorian Pruitt, walked beside him, pointing out classrooms and sharing memories that made them both laugh. "Remember when Coach made us run laps for showing up 5 minutes late?" Dorian said, shaking his head. "I thought I was going to die right there on the track." Travis smiled, but his attention was suddenly drawn to something else. Up ahead, near the intersection of two corridors, a man was kneeling on the floor. He worked slowly, methodically, moving a worn cloth across the linoleum in careful, practiced circles. There was something about the way the man moved that made Travis pause mid-step. Something familiar in the deliberate precision of his movement, the way he held his shoulder, the careful attention to detail that spoke of someone who took pride in his work, no matter what that work was. The man hadn't noticed them yet. He was completely focused on his task, scrubbing away a stubborn scuff mark with the kind of patience that only comes from years of experience. His gray hair was thinning on top, and his blue custodial uniform hung loose on a frame that had once been more muscular. Travis felt his heart begin to race, though he couldn't immediately understand why. There was something about this stranger that wasn't strange at all, something that pulled at memories buried deep in his mind, memories of encouragement and guidance, and someone who had believed in him when believing seemed impossible. "Travis?" Dorian said, noticing his friend had stopped walking. "You okay?" But Travis couldn't answer. He was staring at the man on the floor, watching as he slowly pushed himself up to standing position, one hand bracing against his lower back, as if the years had taken their toll on joints that had once seemed indestructible. And then the man turned around. The face was older, weathered by time and circumstances Travis couldn't yet fathom. There were new lines around the eyes, and the confidence that had once radiated from this man seemed dimmed, but the features were unmistakable, carved into Travis's memory with the kind of permanent clarity reserved for people who change your life forever. "Coach!" The word escaped Travis's lips as barely more than a whisper, but in the silence of the empty hallway, it carried with the force of thunder. The man froze. His eyes, which had been focused on the bucket of soapy water at his feet, slowly lifted to meet Travis's gaze. And in that moment, two worlds collided, the past and the present. The boy who had needed guidance and the man who had provided it, the student and the teacher, the success story and the Harlan Moxley's face went through a series of emotions so rapid they were almost impossible to track. Recognition, shock, embarrassment, joy, shame, all fighting for dominance in an expression that spoke of a man whose entire world had just shifted on its axis. "Travis!" Harlan's voice was barely audible, rough with emotion and disbelief. "Travis Kelce? What are you? How did you? I mean..." The words died in his throat as the full magnitude of the moment hit both men. Here was Travis Kelce, successful beyond anyone's wildest dream, standing in front of the man who had coached him, guided him, believed in him when he was just another kid with big dreams and bigger obstacles. And here was Harlan Moxley, the coach who had shaped champion, now holding a mop and wearing a janitor's uniform, looking as if he wished the floor would open up and swallow him whole. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions and emotions too complex for words. Travis stared at his former coach, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Dorian stood frozen beside him, sensing that he was witnessing something profound, but not fully understanding what. And somewhere in the distance, the sound of footsteps echoed through the corridors as the school day continued around them, oblivious to the fact that two lives were about to change forever. Travis felt the world shift beneath his feet as he stared at the man who had been such a pivotal figure in his youth. Coach Harlan Moxley looked exactly like himself, yet completely different. The broad shoulders were still there, but they seemed to carry a weight that hadn't been there before. The hands that had once demonstrated perfect throwing techniques now gripped a worn mop handle with the calluses of manual labor. "Coach Moxley," Travis said again, his voice stronger now but filled with emotion. "I can't believe it's really you." Harlan's eyes darted around the hallway as if looking for an escape route. He set the mop back in the bucket with hands that trembled slightly, and Travis noticed that his former coach's wedding ring was missing from his finger. The small detail hit him like a punch to the gut, suggesting changes and losses he couldn't yet comprehend. "Travis, you look good," Harlan managed, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Real good. I've seen you on television, of course. Everyone in town talks about you. We're all so proud of what you've accomplished." Dorian Pruitt hung back, recognizing the intensity of the moment but clearly remembering Coach Moxley from their shared high school days. "Coach," he said with a respectful nod, "good to see you again, sir." "See, Dorian Pruitt," Harlan said, his coaching instincts kicking in as he automatically remembered one of his former students. "How's your family? Your father still running the hardware store?" "Yes, sir, he is," Dorian replied. "Business is good. Dad always asks about you when your name comes up." Travis watched this exchange with growing concern. There was something forced about Coach Moxley's cheerfulness, something that spoke of a man trying very hard to maintain dignity in a situation that felt undignified. The coach, who had once commanded respect from teenage athletes with nothing more than a look, was now worried about making small talk while wearing a janitor's uniform. "What are you doing here, Travis?" Harlan asked, deflecting attention from himself. "I mean, what brings you back to the old school? Please tell me you're not here because you're in some kind of trouble." The concern in his voice was genuine, the same protective instinct that had made him such an effective mentor to young people. Even in his current circumstances, his first thought was for the well-being of his former player. "No trouble, Coach," Travis assured him quickly. "I was just in town visiting family, and I wanted to walk through the old place. You know how it is. Sometimes you need to see where you came from to remember who you are." Harlan nodded, understanding that sentiment better than Travis could possibly know. "These halls have seen a lot of dreams take shape over the years. Some of them even came true." "More than some," Travis said firmly. "You helped a lot of those dreams come true, Coach." "You certainly helped mine." A shadow passed across Harlan's face, and he looked down at his feet. "That was a long time ago, Travis. A lot has changed since then." "What kind of changes?" Travis asked gently, though he was beginning to suspect the answer wouldn't be easy to hear. Before Harlan could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the hallway. A woman in her 50s appeared around the corner, wearing the same blue custodial uniform as Harlan. She had gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and carried herself with the no-nonsense attitude of someone accustomed to managing people and situations. "Harlan, you taking your break already?" she called out, then stopped when she noticed Travis and Dorian. Her expression shifted from supervisory to curious as she took in the scene, her employee in deep conversation with two well-dressed visitors who clearly weren't school staff. "Ruth Ann, these are some former students," Harlan said quickly, his voice taking on a slightly defensive tone. "Travis Kelce and Dorian Pruitt. Boys, this is Ruth Ann Sorrell, my supervisor." Ruth Ann's eyes widened as recognition dawned. "Travis Kelce? The football player? Well, I'll be. What are you doing back at Jefferson High?" "Just visiting, ma'am," Travis replied politely, though his attention remained focused on Coach Moxley. "Coach Moxley here was one of my teachers when I was a student." "Teacher?" Ruth Ann looked confused for a moment, then understanding flickered across her face. "Oh, you mean back when Harlan was coaching? That was before my time here. I just know him as one of our best custodial staff members, most reliable employee I've got." The words were meant as a compliment, but Travis watched Coach Moxley's face tighten with what looked like embarrassment. The man who had once been addressed as Coach by everyone in the building was now being praised for his reliability as a janitor. "I should let you get back to your work," Travis said, sensing Harlan's discomfort with the situation. "But Coach, would it be okay if I caught up with you later? Maybe when your shift is over? I'd love to talk more." Harlan looked uncertain, glancing at Ruth Ann as if seeking permission. "I don't finish until 6, he said finally, "and I wouldn't want to keep you from whatever you've got planned." "You wouldn't be keeping me from anything," Travis insisted. "Nothing's more important than catching up with someone who meant as much to me as you did." Ruth Ann, who had been watching this exchange with growing interest, cleared her throat. "Harlan, why don't you take your break now? You've been working hard all morning, and it sounds like you've got some catching up to do with your former student here. Are you sure? Harlan asked, and Travis noticed the deference in his voice, the way someone speaks when they can't afford to lose their job. I'm sure, Ruth Ann said firmly. Take all the time you need. The floors will still be here when you get back. As Ruth Ann walked away, Travis saw her glance back over her shoulder with an expression that suggested she understood there was more to this reunion than met the eye. He made a mental note of her kindness, filing it away as something he might need to remember later. There's a bench outside by the old practice field, Harlan said quietly. If you really want to talk, we could sit there for a while. I'd like that, Travis replied. I'd like that very much. As they walked toward the exit, Dorian fell into step beside them, but Travis could sense his friend's hesitation. The dynamic between Travis and Coach Moxley was clearly something that needed privacy, something too personal for casual observers. Actually, Dorian said, reading the situation perfectly, I just remembered I promised to stop by and see Mrs. Henderson in the office. She was always asking about former students. You two go ahead. I'll catch up with you later, Travis. Travis shot his friend a grateful look as Dorian headed toward the main office, leaving coach and former player to navigate this unexpected reunion on their own. The exit door opened onto a courtyard that led to the athletic fields, and Travis felt another wave of nostalgia as familiar sights came into view. The football field looked smaller than he remembered, but the goalpost still stood proud against the Ohio sky, and the bleachers still held the same faded school colors. I spent a lot of hours out there, Travis said, as they settled onto a weathered wooden bench that had probably been witnessing conversations like this for decades. You spent a lot of hours everywhere on this campus, Harlan replied, with the first genuine smile Travis had seen from him. Library, weight room, classroom, field. You were always working on something. That's what I remember most about you, actually. Not your natural talent, but your willingness to work. You taught me that work ethic, Travis said. You and the other coaches, but especially you. You never let us think talent alone would be enough. Harlan was quiet for a moment, staring out at the field where he had spent so many years developing young athletes into young men. Sometimes I wonder if I taught you too well, he said finally. Maybe if I hadn't pushed so hard for academic excellence, along with athletic achievement, you would have stayed closer to home after graduation. Coach, what are you talking about? Travis asked, confused by the regret in his former mentor's voice. Nothing, Harlan said quickly. Just the rambling of an old man. Tell me about your life, Travis. Are you happy? Are you doing work that matters to you? Travis recognized the deflection, but decided not to push, at least not yet. Instead, he found himself talking about his career, his family, his life beyond football. The things that Coach Moxley had always told his players were more important than any game they would ever play. As he spoke, he watched Harlan's face, seeing pride and joy there, but also something else, something that looked like sadness or maybe loss. The coach, who had always been so focused on his players' futures, seemed somehow disconnected from his own present. And Travis began to realize that this reunion, which had started as a pleasant surprise, was revealing a story he wasn't sure he was prepared to hear. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching a group of current students practice on the field. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass, and Travis found himself transported back to countless similar afternoons when he had been one of those young athletes with dreams bigger than their circumstances. Coach, Travis said finally, I have to ask, how did you end up working custodial here? I mean, not that there's anything wrong with honest work, but you were a teacher, a coach. You had tenure, benefits, a pension coming. Harlan's hands tightened in his lap, and he was quiet for so long that Travis began to wonder if he had overstepped. When the older man finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled, as if he were trying to keep emotions in check. Things change, Travis. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. What kind of curveballs? Harlan sighed deeply and suddenly looked every one of his 63 years. Where do I start? About 5 years ago, my wife Margaret got sick. Cancer. We thought we had good insurance through the school district, but medical bills have a way of adding up faster than you can imagine. Travis felt his stomach drop. Mrs. Moxley had been like a second mother to many of the athletes, always there with snacks after practice and encouragement before big games. I'm so sorry, Travis said. How is she now? She passed 3 years ago, Harlan said quietly, right around the time the school district was going through budget cuts. They offered early retirement packages to senior faculty, and with Margaret's medical expenses still piling up, I thought it made sense to take the package and the lump sum. Travis waited, sensing there was more to the story. The thing about early retirement, Harlan continued, is that it sounds better than it actually is. The pension payments don't start until you're 65, and the lump sum looks like a lot of money until you realize how fast it disappears when you're dealing with medical debt and trying to maintain a house on a teacher's saving. So you came back to work? I tried to find another coaching position first, Harlan said, but the education world has changed a lot in the past few years. Most schools want younger coaches, people with newer certifications, different approaches, and honestly, after Margaret died, I wasn't sure I had the energy to rebuild a program somewhere else. Travis watched his former coach's profile as he stared out at the field. There was a resignation in his voice that was heartbreaking to hear from someone who had once seemed so confident and in control. The custodial position came open here about 2 years ago, Harlan continued. Ruth Ann was willing to hire me, despite my lack of experience in maintenance. It's honest work, like you said, and it keeps me around the place where I spent the best years of my career. Sometimes I can even help out with the current teams when they need an extra hand. Help out how? Oh, nothing official, Harlan said quickly. The new coaching staff is very capable, but sometimes I'll notice a kid who's struggling with technique, or I'll see someone who just needs a little encouragement. Old habits die hard, I guess. Travis felt an anger building in his chest, but not at Coach Moxley. At a system that could allow someone who had dedicated his life to developing young people to end up scrubbing floors, the same building where he had once commanded respect. At an insurance system that could bankrupt a family dealing with illness. At a society that seemed to have forgotten the value of experience and wisdom. Coach, this isn't right, he said. You shouldn't be. Phew, shouldn't be what? Harlan asked, turning to look at him directly for the first time since they had sat down. Shouldn't be working? Shouldn't be taking care of myself? Travis, there's nothing shameful about any honest job. I taught you that. You did teach me that, Travis admitted. But you also taught me that people should be valued for their contributions. And your contributions to this community were enormous. You shaped hundreds of lives over the years. And I'm proud of that, Harlan said firmly. But that was then, and this is now. I'm not the same man I was when you were in high school, Travis. I'm older, I'm alone, and I'm doing what I need to do to get by. There's no shame in survival. Travis heard the defensive note in his former coach's voice and realized he needed to be careful. The last thing he wanted was to make Harlan feel like charity case or an object of pity. You're right, he said. I'm sorry if I sounded like I was judging your choices. It's just hard to see someone who meant so much to me in a situation that seems what? Seems like the system failed you instead of you failing the system. Harlan was quiet for a moment, considering this perspective. Maybe it did, he said finally, but dwelling on that doesn't change anything. I've got a roof over my head, food on my table, and work that keeps me busy. There are people in much worse situations than mine. That doesn't mean your situation is acceptable, Travis said gently. What would you have me do, Travis? I'm too old to start over in education, too proud to ask my former colleagues for help, and too practical to pretend that wishing things were different will actually change them. Travis was quiet, his mind racing. He was beginning to understand that this wasn't just about financial hardship, it was about dignity, purpose, and a man who had lost his identity along with his career. Tell me about the current student, Travis said, changing the subject slightly. Do you still get to work with them at all? Harlan's face brightened slightly. Officially, no, but unofficially, well, kids are kids. They still need guidance, still need someone to believe in them. And sometimes the custodian is the adult who has time to listen when they're struggling. What do you mean? Just last week, there was a young man, Devin Washington, sitting in the hallway of school, looking like the world had ended. He'd just been cut from the basketball team, and he was devastated. The coaches were long gone, but I was still cleaning nearby, so I sat down and talked with him. Travis could hear the passion creeping back into Harlan's voice as he talked about connecting with students. I told him the same thing I used to tell you kids, that setbacks are just setups for comeback. That character isn't built during the victories, it's built during the defeats. That young man listened, really listened, and by the time we finished talking, He was already making plans to try out for track instead. You're still coaching, Travis realized. You're just doing it without the title or the recognition. I suppose I am, Harlan admitted. It's hard to turn off 30 years of habit. These kids still need mentors, still need adults who care about more than just their test scores or their athletic performance. Sometimes the man with the mop is the only one available to fill that role. Travis felt his respect for his former coach growing even deeper. Here was a man who had lost everything: his wife, his career, his financial security, but was still finding ways to serve others. Coach, what if things could be different? Travis asked carefully. What if there was a way to get back to doing what you do best? Officially, instead of just in stolen moments. Harlan looked at him suspicious. Travis, what are you thinking? Because if you're about to offer me money or some kind of charity, I need you to stop right there. I'm not talking about charity, Travis. I'm talking about opportunity. What kind of opportunity? I don't know yet, Travis admitted, but I'm going to figure it out. Someone with your experience and your heart for young people shouldn't be relegated to cleaning floors. You should be shaping futures. Travis, just hear me out, coach. You changed my life. You changed hundreds of lives. That doesn't just stop mattering because circumstances forced you into a different job. Your value isn't determined by your job title. Harlan was quiet, and Travis could see him struggling with hope and skepticism. Let me ask you something, Travis continued. If you could design the perfect job, something that used all your skills and experience, something that let you work with young people again, something that paid you what you're actually worth, what would that look like? Travis, that's a fantasy. Jobs like that don't exist for people like me anymore. Maybe they don't exist yet, Travis said, but that doesn't mean they can't be created. Harlan stared at him for a long moment, and Travis could see the wheels turning in his former coach's mind. For the first time since their reunion had begun, he looked like the confident, visionary educator Travis remembered from his youth. You're serious about this, Harlan said finally. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, Travis replied. The sound of the school bell echoing across the campus interrupted their conversation, signaling the end of another day for the current generation of students. Travis watched as teenagers began streaming out of the building, their voices and laughter carrying across the courtyard. Some of them glanced curiously at the two men sitting on the bench, probably wondering why the custodian was deep in conversation with a stranger. I should probably get back, Harlan said, starting to rise from the bench. Ruth Ann was kind to give me this break, but I've got work to finish before my shift ends. Wait, Travis said, putting a gentle hand on his former coach's arm. Can I ask you one more question? Harlan settled back onto the bench, nodding. When you're working here every day, walking through these same hallways where you used to teach and coach, how does that feel? Really? Harlan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes tracking the movement of students heading toward the parking lot. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than Travis had heard it all afternoon. It's complicated, he said. On one hand, I'm grateful to be here. This place holds most of my good memories. Margaret and I met here when she was substitute teaching, and I was coaching JV football. Every championship trophy in that display case represents kids I helped train. Every year, book in the library has pictures of teams I coached, students I taught. He paused, collecting his thoughts. But, on the other hand, it's like being a ghost in your own life. I see teachers I used to work with, and they're polite, but there's this awkwardness. I know they feel sorry for me, and I hate that. I see parents of kids I used to coach, and I can see them trying to figure out what to say. Some pretend they don't recognize me. Others are overly cheerful in a way that makes it clear they see me as someone who's fallen from grace. Travis felt his heart breaking as he listened to his former mentor describe what sounded like a daily exercise in humiliation. The worst part, Harlan continued, is watching the current coaching staff work with kids who remind me of my former players. I see potential that's being overlooked, techniques that could be improved, young people who need the kind of encouragement I used to be able to provide officially. But now I'm just the janitor. If I speak up, I'm overstepping boundaries. If I don't, I'm watching opportunities slip away. That must be incredibly frustrating. It is, but it's also taught me something important. The relationships matter more than the titles. The influence matters more than the recognition. When Devin Washington needed someone to talk to, He didn't care that I was holding a mop instead of a clipboard. What mattered was that I was there and I was willing to listen. Travis found himself thinking about his own career, about the platforms and opportunities he had been given, about the resources at his disposal. Coach? What if you didn't have to choose between financial security and the ability to influence young people? What if there was a way to have both? I'm listening, Harlan said carefully. I'm still working out the details in my head, Travis admitted. But what if we created something new? A program that used your experience and knowledge in a way that respected your expertise and compensated you appropriately. Before Harlan could respond, they were interrupted by the approach of a woman with short blonde hair and a determined stride. She carried a notepad and wore the kind of practical clothing that suggested she was accustomed to being ready for anything. "Excuse me," she said, as she reached their bench. "Are you Travis Kelce?" Travis stood politely. "Yes, ma'am. And you are?" "Marceline Trott, Jefferson County Gazette. I was here covering the school board meeting when I saw you walking through the building. Mind if I ask what brings you back to your alma mater?" Travis glanced at Harlan, who had also stood and was looking uncomfortable with the attention. "Just a nostalgic visit," Travis said carefully. "Sometimes it's nice to walk through the place where you grew up." Marceline's reporter instincts clearly sensed there was more to the story. "And you're visiting with Coach Harlan Moxley," Travis said, putting a hand on his former mentor's shoulder. "He was one of my coaches when I was a student here." "Moxley," Marceline repeated, recognition dawning in her eyes. "Weren't you the coach who led Jefferson to 3 state championship games back in the early 2000s? Harlan nodded reluctantly. "That was a long time ago." "Not that long," Marceline said, her journalistic curiosity clearly piqued. "What are you doing these days, Coach?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Travis could see Harlan struggling with how to answer, pride warring with practicality. "I'm working here at the school," Harlan said finally, choosing his words carefully. "Still coaching?" "Not exactly." Marceline looked between the two men, clearly sensing tension in the conversation. "Mr. Kelce, is there a story here? A former NFL player returning to reconnect with his high school coach? That sounds like something our readers would find interesting." Travis felt the weight of the moment. He could deflect, protect Harlan's privacy, and keep this reunion personal. Or he could trust his instincts about what his former coach needed most. Not just financial help, but recognition for his contributions and value. "There might be," Travis said slowly, "but it's not the story you're thinking of." "What do you mean?" Travis looked at Harlan, seeking permission. "The story isn't about a successful athlete coming back to thank his coach. The story is about a community that let one of its most valuable assets slip through the crack." Harlan's eyes widened. He started to shake his head. "Travis, don't—" "No, Coach. Someone needs to tell this story." "Marceline, did you know that Coach Moxley isn't coaching anymore? Did you know that one of the most successful educators in this county's history is currently working as a custodian because financial circumstances forced him into early retirement?" Marceline's pen began moving across her notepad. "Is that true, Coach?" Harlan looked trapped, but Travis could see something else in his expression, a flicker of hope that maybe, finally, someone would understand the injustice of his situation. "It's true," Harlan said quietly, "but it's not. I mean, it's honest work, and I'm grateful to have it." "Of course it's honest work," Travis said firmly, "but that's not the point. The point is that we live in a society that claims to value education and mentorship. But when budget cuts come, we're willing to let our most experienced educators disappear rather than finding creative ways to keep them engaged." Marceline was writing furiously now. "Coach Moxley, how many state championships did you win during your career?" 3, Harlan said reluctantly. "But it was never about the championships. It was about the kids. How many students would you estimate you taught and coached over your career?" "I don't know. Thousands, I suppose, over 30 years. "And how many of them went on to college scholarships?" "Maybe 150. But again, that's not—" "It's not what?" Marceline pressed. "It's not the real measure of success. The real measure is how many of them became good people. How many of them learned to work hard, to respect others, to push through adversity. That's what coaching is really about." Travis smiled, hearing the passion return to his former coach's voice. This was the man he remembered, someone who understood that athletic achievement was just a vehicle for character development. "Marceline, Travis said. What if I told you that I'm planning to do something about this situation? What if there was a way to create an opportunity that would let Coach Moxley return to what he does best, developing young people while being compensated appropriately for his expertise? What did you have in mind? I'm still working out the details, Travis admitted. But I think there's a story here about second chances, about recognizing value, about communities coming together to support the people who've supported them. Marceline looked between the two men, clearly recognizing that she was witnessing the beginning of something significant. Coach Moxley, how would you feel about a second chance to work with young athletes again? Harlan was quiet for a moment, and Travis could see him wrestling with hope and skepticism. I'd feel like the luckiest man alive, he said finally. But I learned a long time ago not to count on luck. What if it wasn't about luck? Travis asked. What if it was about people recognizing talent and experience and finding a way to put them to good use? Then I'd say someone better get started, Harlan replied, with the first genuine smile Travis had seen from him all day. Marceline finished writing and looked up from her notepad. Gentlemen, I think I've got enough for a very interesting story. Coach, would you be willing to let me interview you more extensively about your career and your current situation? I suppose so, Harlan said, though I'm not sure why anyone would want to read about an old coach who's past his prime. You're not past anything, Travis said firmly. You're just getting started on the next chapter. As Marceline walked away with promises to follow up on the story, Travis found himself alone with Coach Moxley again. The afternoon was growing cooler, and the shadows on the practice field were lengthening as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. You didn't have to do that, Harlan said quietly, watching the reporter disappear around the corner of the building. Yes, I did, Travis replied. Coach, you spent years teaching me and hundreds of other kids that we had value, that we had potential, that we deserved opportunities to succeed. It's time someone returned the favor. But what if nothing comes of it? What if you get people's hopes up, including mine, and then reality sets in? Travis turned to face his former mentor directly. Coach, do you remember what you used to tell us about fear? Harlan smiled slightly. That fear is just excitement without breath. Exactly. You taught me that being afraid of failure was no reason not to try. You taught me that the only real failure was giving up before you started. That was advice for 18-year-old kids with their whole lives ahead of them. No, Travis said firmly. That was advice for human beings with value and potential, regardless of their age. You haven't stopped being valuable just because circumstances change. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the maintenance crew begin to turn on the lights around the athletic complex. Travis's mind was racing, pieces of an idea beginning to come together in a way that felt both ambitious and achievable. Coach, can I ask you about something specific? He said finally. Of course. When you were talking about seeing potential in current students that's being overlooked, what exactly do you mean? What are you seeing that others aren't? Harlan leaned back on the bench, his expression thoughtful. It's not that the current coaching staff isn't competent. They are, but they're young, and they're focused on immediate results. They don't always have time to see the bigger picture. What bigger picture? Take Devin Washington, the kid I mentioned earlier. He got cut from basketball because he's not naturally coordinated and he's behind in his skill development. But what the coaches didn't see was his work ethic, his coachability, his determination. Those are the qualities that actually predict long-term success, both in athletics and in life. Travis nodded, remembering similar conversations from his own high school years. Or, there's Maria Santos, Harlan continued, warming to his subject. She's a sophomore who's interested in sport, but intimidated by the competitive atmosphere. The current programs don't have space for kids who want to learn and grow at their own pace. Everything is about making varsity teams and winning championships. But some kids just need a place to develop confidence and discover what they're capable of. Travis could hear the educator and his former coach emerging as he talked about individual students and their needs. This was the Harlan Moxley he remembered, someone who saw potential where others saw problems. What about academic support? Travis asked. You used to be big on making sure athletes kept their grades up. That's another area where I see gaps, Harlan said, his voice gaining energy. The current system has tutoring programs, but they're generic. They don't understand that a kid who's struggling in math might actually be brilliant at spatial reasoning, which could translate into engineering or architecture. They don't see that a student who has trouble with traditional classroom learning might thrive with hands-on applications. So you're talking about a more holistic approach to student development. Exactly. And not just for athletes. I see kids every day who could benefit from mentorship, from someone who has time to really listen to their concerns and help them problem solve. But the current staff is stretched too thin with standardized test prep and administrative requirements. Travis felt pieces clicking into place in his mind. Coach, what if there was a program that addressed all of those issues? What if there was a way to create opportunities for kids like Devin and Maria while also providing the kind of individualized academic support you're talking about? That would be ideal, Harlan said. But who would fund something like that? The school district is already cutting budget, not expanding program. What if the funding came from somewhere else? Travis asked. What if there were people in the community who understood the value of investing in young people's development? Harlan looked at him suspiciously. Travis, what exactly are you thinking? I'm thinking that successful people have a responsibility to give back to the places and people that helped make their success possible. I'm thinking that you represent exactly the kind of wisdom and experience that young people need, and there has to be a way to create a platform for you to share that. Travis, no, hear me out. What if we created a community sports and academic development program? Something that served kids who might not make traditional varsity, but who could benefit from athletic training, academic support, and mentorship. Something that was funded privately, but served the public good? Harlan was quiet for a long moment, and Travis could see him considering the possibility. Where would such a program operate? Right here, Travis said, gesturing toward the athletic facilities. The school has plenty of space that's not being used to capacity. We could partner with the district to use facilities during off hours and weekends. And who would run this hypothetical program? Someone with 30 years of experience developing young people. Someone who understands that athletics and academics work best when they're integrated. Someone who knows how to see potential in kids that others might overlook. Travis, you're talking about creating a job specifically for me. That's not how the world works. Why not? Travis asked. Successful businesses create positions for people with specific skills and experience all the time. Why shouldn't education work the same way? Because education doesn't have the profit margin that allow for that kind of flexibility. What if it did? Travis said. What if there were people willing to invest in this kind of program because they understood its long-term value to the community? Harlan shook his head, but Travis could see that he was intrigued despite his skepticism. You're talking about a significant financial commitment. Programs like what you're describing cost money, real money, insurance, equipment, staff salaries, facility maintenance. How much money? Travis asked practically. I don't know. I'd have to think about it, but probably several $100,000 annually once you factor in all the costs. That's not an impossible number, Travis said quietly. Harlan looked at him sharply. Travis, please tell me you're not thinking about funding this yourself, because if you are, that's exactly the kind of charity I can't accept. I'm not talking about charity, Travis replied. I'm talking about investment. Investment in a program that would serve real community needs and generate real results. Investment in something that would make this town a better place for young people. There's a difference? There's a huge difference. Charity is about helping people who can't help themselves. Investment is about recognizing value and creating opportunities for that value to flourish. You're not someone who needs charity, Coach. You're someone whose expertise deserves a proper platform. Harlan was quiet, staring out at the field where he had spent so many years shaping young lives. Travis, even if what you're describing were possible, it would take months to set up. Program development, facility agreements, insurance policies, hiring processes, and in the meantime, I still have bills to pay and a job to do. What if it didn't take months? Travis asked. What if there were ways to fast-track the process for people who were committed to making it happen? How? I don't know yet, Travis admitted, but I know people who might know. I know people who understand how to navigate bureaucracy, how to structure programs, how to create partnerships between private funding and public institutions. Travis, you're talking about changing my entire life based on a conversation we've been having for 2 hours. No, Travis said firmly. I'm talking about recognizing that your life was already changed by circumstances beyond your control. I'm talking about giving you the chance to change it back in a way that serves everyone involved. Harlan stood up from the bench and walked a few steps toward the field, his hands clasped behind his back, in a gesture Travis remembered from countless pre-game speeches. "Can I ask you something?" Harlan said without turning around. "Anything. Why is this so important to you? You've got your own career, your own responsibility. Why are you willing to invest this kind of time and energy in solving my problem?" Travis stood and joined his former coach at the edge of the field. "Because they're not just your problems, coach. They're symptoms of a bigger problem, the way we treat people who dedicate their lives to serving others. Teachers, coaches, social workers, people who choose careers based on making a difference rather than making money. We claim to value what they do, but when they face challenges, we let them fall through the cracks. And you think you can fix that? I think I can fix it for you," Travis said. "And maybe if enough people see that it's possible, they'll start fixing it for others, too." Harlan turned to look at him, and Travis could see tears in his former coach's eyes. "You really believe this could work?" "I believe you're worth the effort to find out," Travis replied. "The question is, do you believe it?" Harlan was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was stronger than Travis had heard it all day. "I believe that if someone is willing to invest in giving me a second chance, I owe it to them and to myself to make the most of it." "Then let's get started," Travis said, extending his hand to shake. "Partners?" "Partners," Harlan agreed, grasping Travis's hand firmly. "Though I still think you're crazy." "You always said the best ideas sound crazy at first," Travis reminded him with a grin. "I did say that, didn't I?" Harlan replied, smiling back. "I guess we'll find out if I was right." The next morning, Travis drove back to Jefferson High School with a plan. He had spent the night making phone calls and preparing a proposal that could change everything. Principal Janet Morrison was a woman in her 50s, with steel gray hair and 20 years of administrative experience. Her office was efficiently organized, with student artwork on the walls. "Mr. Kelce," she said, rising to shake his hand, "I was surprised to get your call this morning." "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice," Travis replied. "I'd like to propose a partnership between the school district and a private foundation I'm prepared to establish. A comprehensive youth development program that serves students who need sports training, academic support, and mentorship." Principal Morrison leaned back in her chair. "Go on." "The program would operate after school hours and weekends, using existing facilities, open to any student, regardless of skill level. The focus would be character development and helping kids discover their strengths." "And who would run this program?" Harlan mocks. Principal Morrison's eyebrows rose. "Harlan's working custodial here now. I'm aware. I'm also aware he has 30 years of experience in education and coaching, multiple championships, and a track record of developing young people. There are procedures for hiring, background checks, insurance requirements. You can't just decide to give someone a job." "I understand. That's why I'm here talking to you first. I want to do this right, in partnership with the district." "What kind of financial commitment?" "Full funding for 3 years. Salary, benefit, equipment, insurance. Approximately $200,000 annually. That's significant. It's an investment in real community return, improved academic performance, decreased disciplinary issues, increased college enrollment rates." After discussing details, Principal Morrison stood up. "I'll need to discuss this with the superintendent and school board. Can you be available this afternoon?" "Absolutely." Travis found Harlan mopping the gymnasium hallway. "Morning, coach," he said quietly. Harlan looked up, surprised. "Travis, I didn't expect to see you again so soon. Can you take a break? I've got news. What if I told you this might be the last time you worry about break schedule?" Harlan stopped mopping. "What are you talking about?" "I just met with Principal Morrison about creating a position for you. A real position. Doing what you do best, with proper salary and respect." "Travis, you didn't." "I did. This isn't charity. It's solving a real problem. They have kids falling through cracks, facilities underutilized, and a community that would support helping young people reach potential. And they're willing to hire me? They're considering it." Principal Morris is calling the superintendent today. Harlan wrestled with hope and disbelief. What if it doesn't work out? Then we figure out another way. But what if it does? What if tomorrow you're designing a program that changes hundreds of young lives? That sounds too good to be true. You taught me the best opportunities usually do sound too good at first. Harlan smiled genuinely for the first time. "I did say that, didn't I?" So, what happens next? You go home and think about your ideal program. Curriculum, goal, success measurements. They'll want specific. Harlan picked up his mop, but his posture was different. Straighter. Purpose. Travis. Yesterday was the first day in 2 years. I felt like myself. That alone was worth everything. Yesterday was just the beginning. Some debts can't be paid with money, coach, but they can be paid with gratitude and making sure people who shaped us get recognition and opportunities they deserve. As Travis walked away, Harlan called after him, "Travis." "Yeah, coach? Thank you for still believing in me. Thank you for teaching me how." 6 hours later, Travis's phone rang with life-changing news. Principal Morrison had spoken with the superintendent, who called an emergency school board meeting. The program was approved in principle, pending final budget review. Harlan Moxley would be returning to education, officially, and with the respect his experience deserved. Some debts, Travis reflected, truly couldn't be paid with money, but they could be paid with gratitude, recognition, and creating opportunities for others to benefit from the wisdom of those who had served before them.